Stand by. Good morning, Nigeria, and welcome to Daybreak, reaching you live from the nation's capital. Happy New Month, and this is the 1st of February 2022. What a great day. I mean, it's something that we should be glad.
Yeah, right, indeed. Good morning, Nigerians. We are glad to have you join us on the program this morning. The month ran so fast, and we didn't even know about it.
It's no mean feat. You know, recall yesterday I said, well, for those who are still in the festive mood, who are yet to resume to work, well, we just exhausted the first month, and we are in the second month already. So if you have all those New Year resolutions, I hope that is already taking shape, because if you haven't gotten anything done, or if you're not running with whatever it is that you set out to do this year, then I would say that you are already failing, because the first month is over already. So today on the program, we'll be looking at quite a number of issues. Insecurity is on the front burner. Over the past weekend, a lot of attacks in some parts of Zamfara, Sokoto, and Niger State, and we'll be looking at that, as well as the issues of the economy, talking about our naira and its value and the impact of central banks' policies, regarding that. So these are some of the issues we'll be looking at, and of course, as usual, the dailies on Daybreak. We'll be taking a look at stories on the front pages of our newspapers, and of course, today in history is one of the issues that we'll be looking at, and much more on the program. But before all of that, we'll take a look at the news highlights first. Now, less than 24 hours after 20 corpses were buried at Galadima Kogo Shoro local government area of Niger State, bandits have again attacked Amale, Dakalo, Kuchiri, Kurmingiwa, Goto Reshidat, Yanki, and Goto Sariki villages in Paikoro local government area of the state. Now, reports say that the attack on Monday left one person dead, while several others sustained various degrees of injuries. According to reports, the bandits attacked the communities in the afternoon and moved from one community to another, looting shops, shooting and abducting people. Meanwhile, the victims with injuries had been taken to Kafinkoro General Hospital for medical attention.
Let's take a look at some more stories. Now, National Assembly has transmitted the Electoral Act Amendment Bill 2022 to President Muhammadu Buhari for assent. The Senior Special Assistant to the President on National Assembly matter, Babajide Omoworare, in a statement said the clerk to the National Assembly, Olatunde Ojo, transmitted the authenticated copies of the Electoral Bill 2022 to the President on Monday. President Buhari had declined assent to the Electoral Bill 2021 transmitted to him last November over the provision of direct primaries as the sole mode of conducting political parties' primaries, explaining that he would assent the Electoral Bill if the lawmakers provided options for the conduct of political party primaries. Now, both the Senate and House of Representatives re-amended the bill on January 25th, 2022 to include direct, indirect, and consensus as the mode of primaries for political parties. The re-amendment is coming a week after the two chambers approved different versions.
All right. Now, the Academic Staff Union of Universities at the Obafemi Awolowo University in Ile-Ife has declared an indefinite strike over unpaid and academic allowance. Now, the university's chairperson of the association, Adiola Egbedokun, stated this in a communique issued after an emergency meeting with members of the union on Monday. According to the communique, the strike became imperative after efforts to resolve the issue with institutions management proved abortive. According to the Congress, there is no serious commitment on the part of the university to affect payment of earned allowance to deserving members, and also noted that all political and diplomatic means to resolve the imbroglio has failed. These are the news highlights this morning on Daybreak. Now let's take a look at the events in our history on February 1st, beg your pardon, February 1st today.
Quite a number of events that happened on the 1st of February in world history. Now, today is the Chinese New Year. It is also World Aspergillosis Day. It is also World Hijab Day, as you have seen earlier on the screen. And the day, is set aside to celebrate, to mark the Muslim faithful who actually wear the hijab, despite backlash and all of that from people in the Western world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, unfortunately, things that shouldn't really be issues are issues in our world
it's
today.
Quite sad.
I really wonder, over in some parts of Nigeria as well, I think it was in Kwara State or somewhere, where you had this primary school where students were denied entry because they were wearing hijabs, and that became a big issue in the community.
Problem.
And I feel like we can do better, with these things, rather than just blanket or blindly deny people, of their rights.
I think we're religious people, and I think it's just good if we respect each other's, religious rights and just move on and pay attention to better things.
Yeah, true. Well, a number of issues as well. Other issues, 2018, the Indian government announces plan to give 500 million people free health care. And in 2016, WHO declares a global public health emergency over the rapid spread of Zika-linked conditions. So these are some of the things that today is known for all over the world. Now, we'll take a look at the dailies on Daybreak shortly after this breather. Stay with us.
But in a situation where you find that they look at the same,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
I have said that.
All right, welcome back. We're going to begin with the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. And the Daily Trust leads with the story 9 years after. Banks battle discos over 820 billion naira debts. And the riders there say employees decry salary backlog, others. NERC to halt owner manager regime. This is according to sources. Little to show in increased electricity supply. You'd also see investors overpaid, poorly managed discos. This is according to experts. And other stories on the Daily Trust newspaper this morning: tariff dispute. NHIS brokers truce between healthcare providers, HMOs. And on page 6 on the Daily Trust newspaper, you see the story about bandits kill 9 in Sokoto, Kaduna, Niger, abduct 50 in Katsina village. It also found a story about Senate setting 3 trillion naira target for revenue agencies. National Assembly transmits reworked electoral bill to President Muhammadu Buhari, and that story be found on page 16 on the Daily Trust newspaper. NNPC seeks energy transition investments, targets low carbon economy. It also find APC chairmanship. Unity, stability will be my bond. This is according to Senator Musa. You'd also see a pictorial there of bandits that were captured, and remanded at the police station on Monday. And then below that, you'd find how IPOP killer herder shot Igbo man's 30 cows. And some of the riders there, my animals worth 30 million, Peter Onyedo. Late herder spent 20 years working for Igbos. You'd also see killing despicable. This is according to Miete Allah, Cattle Breeders Association. These are some of the major stories on the Daily Trust this morning.
All right, now let's take a look at The Guardian this morning. There, the lead story, all about politics. Adamu panel asked for time, February 26th, APC convention shaky. You'd find the writers there saying efforts to reconcile aggrieved chieftains inconclusive. And then we will carefully study interim report of committee, Namani assures. So, other stories at the top there. National Assembly transmits reworked electoral bill to Buhari for assent. And then INEC raises security concern, vows to disqualify erring parties. Balogun others withdraw suit, postpone Ibadan chieftaincy declaration review. Terrorists kill 12 raised homes in Katsina. And then you'd also see Amechi announces delay in rail projects as China suspends funding. Customs, immigration raise alarm as revenue losses threaten 17 trillion naira 2022 budget. And that's on page 6 of The Guardian. And then at the very bottom there, very tiny story there, how Nigeria, others can leverage technology to boost energy access transition by Kerry. These are the stories on the front page of The Guardian today.
On the Punch this morning, APC February convention uncertain. Peace panel demands extension. And the writers, their petition still being submitted. We need one more week, says committee chair. APC registers 41 million members. It also see governors rules out convention postponement. And you see a pictorial there of quite a number of suspected political thugs arrested by soldiers in Ekiti State. And other stories right at the top on page 21. Federal government probes 17 firms over breach of customers' private data, hikes fines. And on page 2, Malami to decide Electoral Act bill. National Assembly transmits document to President Muhammadu Buhari. And on page 21, 243 firms jostle for CBN's multi-billion naira loan scheme. Okorocha unveils presidential bid, knocks zoning, ex-governor charged with 2.9 billion naira fraud. And you'd also see other stories there on the Punch this morning on page 20. EFCC detains Medview airline boss for alleged $900,000 Hajj fraud. And on page 4 and page 5, human parts found with me for my ex-boss, promising 30 million reward. This is according to driver. It seems in recent times there has been a lot of ritual stories, you know, on the news, and it's really, really very sad. You find the detail of that story on page 4 and page 5. Fear grips Ekiti community over influx of herdsmen, farmers deserted. These are some of the major stories on the Punch this morning.
All right, now let's take a look at the Nation newspaper. On the Nation, the lead story says why APC is in crisis by Boni Reconciliation Panel. You'd find the writer says ego, perception, failing division. Panel with 47 petitions asks for more time. The stories at the top there, above the nameplate. High chiefs withdraw suit to end Olubadan succession row. You'd see also EFCC slams 2.9 billion naira fraud charges on Okorocha and others. Ex-Imo Governor Tambuwal to run for president. The writer says Peter Obi weighs options. Well, these are the most visible stories here. There's also another story at the bottom below the leading story. It says revenue generating agencies get 3 trillion naira target. Customs laments Financial Act effect. So these are the stories here, mainly on the Nation newspaper this morning.
Okay, let's take a look at some more stories on This Day newspaper. The lead story there states, Buhari, my successor will inherit homegrown economy, stable democracy, revamped security forces. Oh, wow. And then the writer there says, Nigeria facing historic transition, says Obagbena rather. Nigeria, UK move to deepen security, hold defense partnership dialogue in London. And other stories there on This Day, 100 for 100 policy. CBN disburses 23 billion naira to manufacturers. MFLA new forex policy underway. And federal government stakeholders land Apex Bank's drive to boost economy. NMPC positioned to lead Africa in energy transition, says Kyari. These are some of the major stories on This Day newspaper.
All right, finally, let's take a look at the Blueprint newspaper this morning, which leads with the story, federal revenue generating agencies, why we can't meet National Assembly 3 trillion naira annual revenue target, and that's on page 6. The writer says 2022 Finance Act had robbed customs of its operational mandate. And that's according to CG, the Custom Controller General of Customs, Hamid Ali, retired. Also, you'd see another story there. We lose 400 billion naira annually in outsourced services to UK-based firm. And that's according to the Immigration. Senate promises to look at the Act contract. NAFDAC warehouses 3-year capital votes. Below that, why Ogoni cleanup project will outlive Buhari administration, according to the federal government. And then also, you'd find at the very bottom, 21 Kogi local government areas provide free Medicare to 300 communities. JAM fixes 2022 UTME for May 6th to 16, adopts USSD code. Hoodlums burn Obasanjo's 139-hectare mango farm in Benue. You'd also see insecurity. AMAC donates 30 cars to FCT police. Other stories at the top there talks about commercial banks still flout CBN directives on BVN, failed transactions. Stock exchange announces federal government's multi-tranche 4 billion naira euro bonds. 5G network, aircraft not in danger in Nigeria, NCAA DG. And then the last story, the APC reconciliation, more work still needs to be done. That's according to the committee. Well, these are the stories on the front pages of our papers this morning. We have in the studio Sunday Michael, Deputy Business Editor, Daily Trust newspaper, to give us perspectives on these stories. Good morning. Welcome to Daybreak.
Good morning. Happy New Month.
Yeah, same to you. All right. Quite interesting stories. Political stories are everywhere this morning. Yes, specifically talking about the APC convention coming on the February 26th. Now, the peace panel is raising alarm that, look, we need more time, in line with the fears that others have expressed, about the likelihood of that convention being, an explosion. So, I don't know. What do we expect?
I think what is coming to the fore now is not unexpected. If you recall, the conventions were hurriedly fixed after the president's New Year media engagement, where he said the continual delay in having that convention could lead to conceding grounds to the opposition. And so they had to come up with a date. But the committee had been in the works since September last year. The idea is to reconcile aggrieved. I mean, you don't go to a contest with a divided house. I think that is the essence of that reconciliation. With over 40 petitions, if you really want to achieve genuine reconciliation, it's not just enough to receive petitions. You also have to study them. You have to understand the issues that are being brought forward, and then make genuine efforts to resolve conflicting parties. And these things take time. It requires sometimes a forth and back, and a forth again, and a back, and some kind of truce, which would somehow require compromise. So they felt that the time between now and the convention is rather too early. They were supposed to have submitted their report on Monday. And if you must hold a convention on the 26th, as we have heard, then the party should have taken that reconciliation report, looked at the the recommendations, act on them, and then come up with a date. Set up subcommittees for the convention that would determine how much nomination forms will be sold. You have to do the selling of that form, and then somehow screen candidates, take candidate submissions and then screen them ahead of the convention. And where people have a problem with your screening them out, you have to leave room for them to contest that denial, and then you resolve those issues before the actual convention. So you see, there are quite a number of things that must happen before the convention, and they feel that the time is rather too short for them to do that. But some governors have continued to express confidence that the date will hold. Apparently, if you are in good standing with what the status quo is, you don't feel any pressure, because maybe somehow it favors you. But these are all germane issues, and it puts to question whether the February 26th date will be visible. But that will be a question for the APC active party members to really ponder upon.
But do you see, further postponement, because governors are ruling out, that?
Yeah, but largely because governors are very strong party members. They call the shot. They are the leaders of the party in the state. If they really wanted to go ahead, especially again because they also provide a chunk of the funding, if they wanted to go ahead, somehow it will go ahead. But the fears of all those who are calling for one form of extension or reconsideration of the date had been going into a process with a lot of unsettled issues would just mean, usually even where there are no such problem, after the conventions you see a lot of implosion. People who feel they deserved a space that were not given naturally will start looking for alternative platforms to pursue their aspirations. So if you even go into this one with so much of these issues to resolve, it just basically leaves the room for even more aggrieved members to begin to think of the alternative vehicles to ride on.
All right, well, another story to look at. The Daily Trust leads with the story about banks, battling with discourse over 820 billion naira debts. That's since 9 years, now. What exactly do we know so far as the story?
The Nigerian privatization story, as far as the power sector is concerned, has not exactly gone smoothly. I mean, not comparable to what we have seen in telecom sectors, where the moment the private sector came in, they took complete charge, of that sector and what they needed to do, whether it is in terms of investment, whether it is in, planting the kind of infrastructures that would take the service to the nooks and crannies of this country. And if you recall those days, it was a big story on NTA or on the newspapers. If they are getting into a new town, they will say, we are now live in Borno, we are live in Kaduna, we are live in Zaria and all that. Those were the kind of experience that we got firsthand from privatization. And everyone had hoped that with the power sector privatization, maybe for once, it would have relegated government to the background and allow private fundings to really now come up and replicate what we have seen in the telecom sectors with the power sector. But the story has been different. Has been different for a lot of reasons. Some argue that the power assets were overpriced at privatization, and so People had no complete idea of how much it really needed to rejuvenate this power sector. So the moment they were done with the acquisition, they became stocked, with so much debt that it left them with not so much to invest in the actual revamping of these nearly dead assets that they bought. That's one part of the argument. The other is that the people who bought this asset really did not have the deep pockets or the technical know-how to kickstart those kind of rejuvenation. And so the effect of all of these different crises it had gone through had seen government coming back again to bail and rebail the power sector with all kinds of power sector intervention coming from the Central Bank of Nigeria, which apparently is the money belonging to you and I. So it is more like we are privatized, but we are still injecting government funds to make these places even remain afloat. And so in all of the interventions and everything they had taken from the bank, we had seen nearly $2 billion, about 820 billion naira sunk into this power sectors. And yet, most of them are still comatose. I mean, the Ibadan Disco was just taken over by the Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria. All of us are aware of the tussle at the Abuja electricity distribution company. We know that there was a similar challenge with the Yola distribution company. I mean, and the crisis seemed to spread right quite evenly, So it's so much that needs to be done. In fact, the National Electricity Regulatory Commission is even talking about a crisis with owners who had brought out funds to buy these things but have no technical capacity to manage them, running the places directly, because these are technical assets. You may have the funding, but it requires a different kind of skill to run. There are also other genuine states crises which has to do with whether it is the supply of gas, to the generating plants, or whether it is the inefficiency of transmission equipment not being able to evacuate as much power that is even generated. I mean, our transmission lines are weak, we understand. They do not have the capacity to evacuate all we generate and even distribute them. And whether it is even the issue of pricing, of the electricity asset. How many times they have intended to raise the prices, and we keep shouting that the prices would be beyond the average Nigerian. They are saying in terms of modern reality, current realities, exchange rate, and all of that, whatever we are buying this power at is not visible for any kind of growth and reinvestment into the sector. So the issues are huge. I can't tell you now what really needs to be done. Perhaps more funding has to go into that place, but beyond funding, a complete reevaluation of how the power sector is currently.
Okay. Yeah. Now, there's one other story on This Day newspaper that states Buhari, my successor, will inherit homegrown economy, stable democracy, revamped security forces. In your assessment, is this really so?
I honestly wish. I wish that would be the situation for whoever is the successor to this government with less than 15 months before he hands over the baton. Not just for the sake of the successor, for you and I. I mean, in the name of God. We were discussing before this program came on live on how some of us are profiled based on our religion or the places we come from before we are even able to rent a house in a federal capital territory. That is a snowball effect of the distrust, the deep-rooted distrust that is taking all of us, by the jugular. So there's a serious crisis, whether we choose to admit them or not, whether we choose to be apolitical or take sides with any government. All is not well, and for them to even say we hope to do this, it means wherever we are today is not ideal. The only thing we can do is to wish them well, because everyone is tired of the current situation. Honestly, we couldn't have asked for better, because with insecurity, with instability, you really can plan. At the Daily Trust Dialogue, you heard clearly how households barely boil water and drink and pretend that they have eaten for the day. That's not a palatable condition for anybody.
No. Well, other interesting stories from the economic angle as well. The revenue generating agencies of government, are saying that, look, this target set by National Assembly, 3 trillion naira, is way above what they can meet and all of that. For instance, the customs is saying that the 2022 Finance Act somehow limits their operations in some way. And so do you think that there's some kind of policy somersault here?
I don't think it's a policy somersault of some sort. Usually with new policies, you'll find these overlapping tendencies here and there. And this revenue generating agency, I think they do not include the customs, the FIRS, whose mandate actually it is to raise revenues. They are just other agencies of government that are categorized as revenue generating. For instance, the immigration, especially because of the number of Nigerian passports that is sorted on an annual basis. The Federal Road Safety Corps, for instance, because they issue licenses that are paid for by Nigerians, whether fresh or renewal, and including vehicle plate numbers and all of that. Because the customs alone did about 2.4 trillion, you recall. The FIRS did about 4.5 trillion. So these two agencies did somewhere in the region of 7 to 8 trillion naira alone. But they are complaining that with the new Finance Act, I'm talking about the custom, that there are one or two things that they felt used to be in their domain that have now been vested in other agencies. For the immigrations, for instance, they are saying the annual worth of the Nigerian passport business per annum is somewhere around 400 billion. That's somewhere around $1 billion. But because it has been contracted to a firm abroad, I think Malaysian or island firm, the government gets only 30% of the proceeds. 30% of whatever is the proceeds of 400 billion. Another 7% is given to immigration to maintain their facility, and about 60% goes to the contracting firm. And the questions they were raising were valid. If we really want to plug revenue loophole, we have the Nigerian Printing and Minting Company. If you invest half of that money in that company, whatever it is that it is lacking in being able to print Nigerian passports or security documents in Nigeria should be able to, it should be provided for. And we've been doing this for nearly 10 years. So if you multiply 400 billion by another 10 years, you'll be talking somewhere in the region of 4 trillion that has gone in the directions that none of us can really account for. So that is a revenue leak. And then if you wake up for that kind of agency where it's major source of income in those kind of things, and you wake up and you say you are increasing their target, how do you expect them to raise that kind of money? So those are the things. So on the one hand, that is why these agencies are raising concerns that if you really want us to do this, but then some of these things that are inhibiting our optimal performances should also be considered and reviewed.
Okay. There's this other story, that seems to be a problem for us, and it has been making the rounds in recent times. It's the issue of, ritual killings. Here on the Punch newspaper, it states human parts found with me for my ex-boss promising 30 million naira reward. Just a few days ago, I think we saw the story about 3 young, very teenagers, I would say.
15, 14.
Yes, teenagers that cut the head off of one of their girlfriend or something. It seems it's becoming very rampant these days.
I think for a number of years now, we have allowed all kinds of things to hit our screen, and it's alarming how people now want to simply get rich, using every way possible. You can't understand it. We saw the ones that had already killed. Just 2 days ago, another video went viral of 12, 13, 14 years old boys saying they left their city where their parents are based to another city, and they said openly before the TV cameras that their ambition is to become Yahoo boys, in quotes. And you know what that includes? You know, the rituals are included and all of that in the bid to become rich. And you wonder what a 14, 15 years old wants to do with the kind of money it aspires to get. So it's appalling. We are really losing it. Something really has to be done, especially because when you see people with ill-gotten wealth, flaunting them left, right, and centers, and becoming the center of attraction in a society that has lost value for hard work, for ethical conduct, then he begins to tell people who are coming behind them that if you really want to become somebody, if you want to be recognized, if you want to live a comfortable life, then this is the way to go. We have to find a way to discourage this kind of wealth. First of all, by even asking questions. Based on your age and the things you do, there are certain kind of wealth that are not expected of you. If you are seen flaunting those kind of wealth, then questions should be asked. I mean, there were even apparent contradictions. Just 2 days ago, over the internet, a renowned pastor somewhere in Port Harcourt, called for these boys to stop this act. Another pastor seated somewhere else was saying the Yahoo boys are not the problems of this country. You can imagine the seeming contradictions coming from the altar. One in an attempt to condemn what he feels is a problem, and the other one saying, you should be talking to the politicians instead, rather than talking to these kids.
And talking about that, it seems as if the social media space has created a kind of attitude or habit where people just seek attention at whatever cost. They do not care about the message that they throw out there, but just to get their attention. So whatever it is that will get their attention for me, whether I'm on the right path, whether I'm sending positive messages or negative messages, it doesn't really matter, as long as it brings the traffic towards me, it generates conversations around me and all of that.
That's
a big issue.
I agree. What the social media has done, which is the downside of social media, is to democratize dissemination of information. So these days, you don't have to wait for any media house to put out anything before you consume. It's a marketplace of ideas, positive or negative. But that again, confers on us, the media, and including the government, the responsibility not just directly to regulate the social media space, but to also churn out positive information that provide sufficient and adequate counter for this kind of negative information, so. And these strategies must be deliberate. So if you are doing something that is, videos about the other day of people who, part of the rituals, were supposed to excrete in a public place, in a public junction by daytime, somewhere in Imo State.
That video too.
So what happens after that? Those guys they were not putting on a mask. The government, through its agencies, would have been able to apprehend these people and bring them to book. And the world must see that these guys are properly reprimanded in the open, just to serve as deterrence for people who think because ABC did it and nothing happened, I can as well replicate these things, because it is actions without consequence, that encourage more people to do the same thing. If you are active and you are able to arrest 4 or 5 of those celebrity cases and treat them in the way and manner that they deserve, and show people that when you go this route, this is the kind of judgment that awaits you, then it sends a different kind of message to people who are watching them, who would then understand that this is not a banana republic. You can just not do anything you want and go scot-free. So,
needless to say, the way and manner in which we handle criminals, especially those who have money, even the security, officials that that handle those people, sometimes they are not treated as though these are criminals. They are treated as though these are some kind of celebrities or something. They give them all kinds of cover, and all of that. The way in which they protect them and all that.
We saw it with, I'm trying to remember the personality now, who was remanded in prison, and when they came out of a prison house, we saw a fight between 2 government agencies on who to take over that person. It speaks volume. It tells you of what kind of treatment that person is even likely to get behind bars. That is, if at all, he's even treated like somebody who is a criminal, in quote. So much is wrong with our correctional system. So much is wrong with our justice system. So much so that people don't even see them as being has been hard enough, you know, to deter future occurrence of those things. So, if you like, the criminals see it like a simple way out. We heard the story once of a permanent secretary who was tried for so much money, and at the end of the trial, he was convicted for a certain amount of money or with an option of jail term. And we understand that he came out of the courtroom and headed for his booth and brought out whatever it was that was supposed to pay for and paid for it outrightly, and they commenced the process of setting him free. It's how cheapened, you know, justice has become in this country. And until the punishment outweighs the crime, you know, more than doubles the crime, people would really not see whatever we have as justice system, in our justice system as deterring for any kind of crime, really.
Okay, now the National Assembly has transmitted the reworked electoral amendment bill to President Muhammadu Buhari for assent. Do you think it's going to be different this time around?
Well, the president, in his words, if we would hold him, said he is willing to sign the amended electoral act if some of the observations he made, you know, are taken into account. And in fairness, those amendments have been made. So we hope, in good faith, that the president would also assent to it, not just for the sake of the National Assembly, but because this whole process has kept the Independent National Electoral Commission in abeyance. You know, procurements need to be made for the devices that will aid these elections. Some of these procurements are not items that you buy off the shelf. You have to reach out to the manufacturers with certain specifications, and they have to go through a procurement process themselves, you know, to then manufacture this item, test run them for quality control, and then go through all of the hassles of logistics to also ship them in. You have to take this inventory in, and also try some of these materials and ensure that they are in good conditions for the election. So this is a procedural thing. And so the area we sort these things out, especially the parts that will require those procurement and all, so that they can then begin proper preparations, because credible elections is a function of preparation. If you get everything right and the preparation is poorly done, it can impede on the credibility of the elections.
All right. Well, we'll take a quick break now, and then when we come back, we'll continue with a look on the stories on the front pages of our newspapers. Please stay with us. This is Trust TV, documenting the Nigerian story. From all around the world,
our news is factual and concise,
giving you fresh news as it breaks.
Nigerians in the diaspora have decried the unavailability of Nigerian passport booklet.
One tricycle rider feared death while 6 others are critically injured after a moving train hit.
When I sit on the news desk every day,
there's a deep sense of responsibility that overwhelms me.
A responsibility to deliver a message to our viewers
in the most professional way possible. Trust TV, documenting the Nigerian story. All right, thank you for staying with us. And if you're just joining, you're watching Daybreak, reaching you live from the nation's capital in Abuja. We have in the studio Sunday Michael, Deputy Business Editor, Daily Trust newspaper, reviewing the stories on our front pages this morning. Quite a number of issues really of interest. Now, also, in the past few days, we've seen a kind of a as well, I won't call it a surge because it's always been like that, but more like terrorists now becoming more bolder. They issue threats to communities to say, hey, if you don't pay us, we're going to come after you. We're going to rain fire on you. And they did that, even when the communities pay the levies, imposed on them by these terrorists. Over the past few days, we've seen in Sokoto, and now even on the front page of Daily Trust newspaper, we're told that 9 people have been killed in Sokoto, Kaduna, and Niger, and then about 50 were abducted in Katsina State. So, well, recently, that the Nigerian Air Force, for instance, says that they now have about 38, aircraft in their possession, to deal with this criminal activities. But one wonders really whether we've been able to deploy all of that, with the proscribing of these terrorists, I mean these bandits as terrorists now by the government.
That's a difficult question to answer because what we have seen in the Nigerian context is that aircraft do not translate to results on the ground, It's also difficult because some of the things we see, appear to defy logic. And I say that because if people are gathered in this building and you do anything to cause disarray, what will be the next course of action? They will disperse, right? Maybe to the building to the left, or to the one to the right, or the ones behind. So if you are going to do anything to disrupt their peaceful coexistence here, where should you wait for them? The likely places where they will disperse to. So you are hitting Kaduna, you're probably hitting Zamfara, but you are doing nothing in Sokoto, you're doing nothing in Niger. Isn't it common sense that once they disperse, they will reassemble again in these places? So that is where I say some of the actions don't logically add up for some of us, especially because there is really no wall between one state or the other. Sometimes you don't even know when you had crossed the line, so it is only common sense that as they move, they will be causing havoc along the paths that they travel. And so what we have seen is places that have nothing to do with the original cases of banditry and the rest now suffering massive casualty because these bandits seem to be relocating from point A to the other. And maybe we can't exactly say that some of these killings may be as a result of confrontation. You come into a community that is not known to your ideology and all of that, and they try to resist you. The next thing you do, because you have a superior firepower, is to just shoot innocent women, children, and farmers who you have nothing to do with your grievances against the state, against or whoever you think has offended you. So it's a failure of our security architecture. And they keep saying they are reviewing this architecture, they are reviewing. So you wonder what is being reviewed, because in earnest, it appears that we have been doing the same thing over and over and over again. And the next thing you will hear now is that maybe they probably will have to shut down telecom maxes in these places again so that they are not able to communicate. We have to be more pragmatic. Pragmatism in this case would then involve carrying everyone along. We already know that this action we are going to take will snowball into ABC and XYZ. Have you sensitized the community on the fringes? Have you tried to create some kind of synergy with their local security network, the vigilantes as we have come to know them, such that they can sell credible intelligence to you, or even provide some kind of subtle resistance until backup is available? I mean, you were reading the update and we hear of how they go from community to community. These guys are not flying private jets themselves. And sometimes moving around the northern part of this country can be a Herculean task because it's a massive land space. And so maybe they have carried out this operation in a space of 5-6 hours unhindered. It speaks to the whole comment around pockets of ungoverned spaces around this country. So you wonder how they can transition so smoothly and create so much havoc. And sometimes we don't even get to know of it until days after the incident, had happened. So it leaves a lot to ponder about. It shows a complete disconnection between the efforts that are being made at the center and what is actually happening in the fringes.
It's quite
All
tragic.
right. Well, another story that I would like for us to, take a look at is this story about how IPOB killed a herder, shot Igbo man's 30 cows in the southeast. I mean, it's more like the saying that when you are in the market, do not throw stones, because you really don't know who is going to hit, or another one throws stones at the glass house. But I mean, if you look at this story, the owner of the cows is actually an Igbo man. So if IPOB says it is, fighting for the cause of the Igbos, here you have it. Your own fellow Igbo man is now being, impacted negatively by your actions and all of that. I mean, it says, the man, his animals is worth 30 million naira, for him, and the herder has been working there for about 20 years.
Some of those prejudices that live with us, that is now affecting the way we do things. What has been happening in the Southeast, if you ask me, is a people, loading their own gun, and shooting themselves on the foot. Even if the herder wasn't an Igbo man, you are likely to contribute to the economic development of the place where you reside. He sells his cows, for instance, in that market. So he provides a nourishing value. He probably pays his tax to the local community where he stays. Who knows? The manuals generated by the cows nourish the ground where he lives to operate. So for somebody like that, he's not exactly a nuisance. He is not your problem. If he's been there for 20-something years, he's not like the ones who travel from Mali and all of that and pass through your places and cause havoc and disappear. He identifies with that community. He doesn't feed on his cow. He probably needs to go to your market to buy food. That's spending in your local community. Those are not the kind of people you want to harm. Except you don't know the value, the economic value that they bring into the system. A man who has cows worth over 30 million, his annual average expenditure would not be less than $1 million spent in your own economy. Those are the kind of people ideally you should be looking for. And so it shows you how so much disconnected we are from how everything we do in turn comes back to hurt us. If you do these things, you are destroying economic activity and you cannot make progress doing that. Some of the advanced economies we envy were not built by people from just that part of the place. It was built by capitals that came from all over. We should be encouraging that, So like you said, at the end of the day, it turned out that the stone they threw in the marketplace ended up hitting one from their own household. Unfortunate as it may, but I mean, it speaks volume.
Right.
And until people who should condemn these things rise up to condemn them, and not just condemn them, but take concrete steps to stop them, we will continue in this vicious cycle. For instance, you want to ask yourself, the IPOB have always mentioned that the Southeast are part of their territory, but why is it difficult for those pronouncements to take root in the Southeast? Because the governors have said, hey, if you do anything here, we would match you banter for banter. So leadership in those places must take responsibility. You think people sit at home because they enjoy not showing up at the market? I mean, the Igbos, as we know, are shrewd business people. You think they want to sit at home and lose some of them sell perishable things. So it means for the 2-3 days they couldn't go out, it meant they lost those things. What is the economic benefit to them of keeping them at home? We have had to run stories here of our artisans who live daily by what they make and do with their hands, have been crying about the effect of this thing. So the only way to kick against this thing is for everybody who is on the other side to come out and say enough is enough.
All right.
Well, thank you so much for coming on Daybreak this morning. We've been speaking with Deputy Business Editor, Daily Trust, Sunday Michael, giving us perspectives on the program. We hope to have you next time as
It's
usual.
my pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right, let's quickly take a short break. When we come back, we'll start our first discussion on the program. Do stay.
This is Trust TV, documenting the Nigerian story.
Good evening, or good afternoon. Permit me to welcome you once again to this important briefing, where the command is entrusted to this command under the leadership of the Commissioner of Police, CP Ayuba and Elkana PSC Daga, will give you an update regarding another landmark achievement recorded by the Disaster Police Command in conjunction with other security agencies. The achievement is regarding the rescue.
I see. All right, thank you for staying with us. Well, there you have, that report making some announcements about some arrests that were done by the Nigerian police. Now, to usher us into the first discussion, since the upsurge in the nefarious activities of insurgents, bandits, kidnappers, and other assorted range of antisocial fellows, the call for more arms and ammunition, including the latest military weaponry, have grabbed vintage headlines. Now, it is generally assumed that obsolete and inappropriate weapons have been major reasons why the Boko Haram insurgency, now in its 12th year, continues to gather more steam, when ordinarily the delusional insurgents would have been in disarray. To give us perspectives on this issue, we have in the studio the former spokesman of the Nigerian Army, Brigadier General Sani Kukashika Usman, retired, to talk to us. Good morning and welcome to Daybreak.
Good morning, and thank you for having me on your program.
All right. Well, over the past few days, we've seen that the terrorists, because I wouldn't call them bandits anymore after the proclamation by the federal government, they seem to be marauding around, and, it doesn't look like we have a grip on them as per tracking their movement and all of that. They move so freely from one village to another, in one day. They carry out attacks and kill, hundreds of people. Is it that difficult to track, these criminals?
Well, if you're talking about tracking, I don't think it is difficult, but knowing the circumstances under which we found ourselves and the complexity of the security challenges, you might also say that it is difficult, in the sense that they are not spirit, they are human beings just like you and I, and the approaches beyond the kinetic, I think there is need for non-kinetic means. That means there should be a holistic approach to it, involving all the stakeholders. It may surprise you to understand that despite the level of atrocities being committed by these criminals, and there are still some people that do not see it as criminality, as it is as a kind of means of livelihood, because a lot of people are benefiting from the war economy system associated with complex situations. So when you look at all those factors, then you realize that it's difficult, but at the same time it is not difficult if the will and the whole gamut of the Nigerian society is taken on board. Take for instance, we have had instances where there were divergent views for those people who are statutorily responsible for the protection of life and properties of Nigerian citizens and residents in Nigeria. People were even granting amnesty, and others were of the opinion that, look, these people are criminals and terrorists and they should be treated as such. And it is not quite long that even the Nigerian state decide to, give legal backing to what these people are, calling them terrorists as it is. Because over time, these are people that have done more than what an average criminal should do. They have killed, they have maimed, they have raped, they have displaced people. And sometimes they did despicable things that you cannot even say them. So what were we waiting for? So these are the issues that you have to look at it. And again, if you look at it over time, what brought about these issues? it borders on the issue of good governance. And so long as there is no good governance, and good governance does not mean just dividends of democracy, but, rule of law, and the fact that security is a collective responsibility. Every citizen, so much as he or she has privileges to enjoy, he or she equally have some responsibilities to fellow citizens and to state itself. So when you take the aggregation of this, you realize that it is not difficult to track, but at the same time, when you look at the other side of it, it is difficult simply because we have no harness those resources or those means to which we could have dealt with these issues. And unless we do so, we will keep on going through the same cycle again and again.
Okay. Now, the UN released a statement earlier in the week saying Nigeria cannot win the war against Boko Haram on the battlefield, suggesting that we need more community development, efforts. Are you of that opinion as well?
Well, has Nigeria declared war anyway? And given the UN system, I'm not even surprised that they should say so. And I've just mentioned the issue of war economy, and beyond that, there is also the issue of responsibility to do harm. To do no harm. Now, in developmental studies, now for United Nations, they are more or less concerned about the humanitarian problem. And I think we should look at what are those things that brought about Boko Haram and make Boko Haram to develop to the extent to which it developed between 2009 to date. And now that we are seeing, semblance of, whittleness of, the Boko Haram is whittling gradually as compared to maybe 2014, 15 and thereabout, up to 16 thereabout. So now I wouldn't be surprised, because they are more or less concerned about humanitarian issues and all the rest. But beyond humanitarian issues, there are things that need to be done. What are those things? Take, for instance, to what extent those areas affected by Boko Haram insurgency have been, enjoying good governance. Because I know, if you take, for instance, some part of northern Borno, there is a local government that I know, unless of today, that has never seen even a feeder road. It's a local government headquarters. So if you don't have such means of transportation, so, basic things such as feeder road, not talk of third road to a local government headquarters, to what extent will you be able to bring in developmental projects to other hinterlands, associated with that local government? So these are issues that we need to address. Then we look at the educational imbalance, and then we look at the economic deprivation, because what is the recruitment system? What is the center of gravity of the Boko Haram terrorists? It revolves around ease of gathering information, recruiting, and intelligence. That means they have, sympathy of some people. And why should such people be sympathetic to people that have been committing heinous crime against humanity? So these are the issues. So they will be concerned about the statistics, hunger, and all the rest of the thing. But the reality on the ground is that we need to address the issues that brought about this Boko Haram insurgency. And remember again, there is this issue of ideology. It is very, very difficult to defeat ideology. To what extent those leaders have over time gathered followership, and how can you de-radicalize those people to understand that that ideology is a terrible ideology, is antithetical, is against human existence, against the tenets of Islam. So these are things that we have to address beyond the humanitarian. Agreed, we have humanitarian problems, but I think these are issues. But thankfully, things are getting brighter with each passing day anyway.
Okay. All right. Now, some have said that the crisis that we are dealing with is a manifestation of age-long problem. It accumulated. The issues, the humanitarian crisis that we have, accumulated over time. The issues of out-of-school children, it didn't start, 2 years ago or 3 years ago. It took time, before it came to be what it is. And so this is just, an explosion that we are experiencing of all of these problems, all right? So it means that the issues of the humanitarian crisis won't just disappear in one day. The issues of poverty will not just disappear because government says, okay, we have approved so and so amount for the poor, and so we are going to share money to them, and then so poverty will just disappear. No, it's not going to happen. Issues of infrastructural development, it will take time before, you know, they happen. But then we have killings happening every day, and we want those killings to stop. Like, they have to stop. I mean, as soon as we can get it right, they have to stop. So what do we need to do in the short term to first of all ensure that people are secured before we can even look at the issues of infrastructural development and the rest of them?
Well, to start with, I think whoever has made the assertion about the accumulation of the problem and that manifests over time, he or she is quite right, because I think we tend to neglect some aspect. Take, for instance, from 1999 to date, you know, even before the advent of the present democratic dispensation, we know that the democracy has come to stay, and this is what Nigeria wants. So what are those things that were put in place to ensure that democracy is sustained? First and foremost, we should understand that it requires accountability, and it has bureaucracy, and people should have been galvanized to understand that decision-making process, policy-making process takes time, and it's about consultations and what have you. So people ought to be patient and more tolerant as it is. But unfortunately, we did not really, you know, strengthen the institutions that will make an average Nigerian to have trust and faith in them. And what we have is, you know, bent of emotion and anger against the state, you know, that manifests in various crises that we're experiencing now. This is issue number one. Therefore, and over time with democratic process, people tend not to emphasize on the welfare and security of the people. We are thinking of other things, and hence the level of unemployment we have, and the level of criminality we have, and of course the level of humanitarian crisis that we have. Coming back to what you are saying, the best thing is when you are faced with a dire situation, it require dire, you know, steps. Take, for instance, we shouldn't have dissipate our time wasting energy on what to do. Or rather, we should be decisive on issues of how to deal with issues. Take, for instance, way back, the average understanding of, you know, the Boko Haram issue in Nigeria tends to differs from one section of the country or another. Take, for instance, even among the northern Nigeria, a lot of people then thought that it is a northeastern Nigerian's problem. And even among northeastern Nigeria, people tend to think that it is a particular ethnic group or a particular state's problem. It is not supposed to be so. Any problem that affects any part of the country or a Nigerian citizen has the capacity of affecting other parts of the country and other citizens. Therefore, we ought to have seen it, you know, as one for all for one, you know, when it comes to security issues. There should have been a holistic approach regardless of which government is in power. So that is issue number one. Issue number two is that people should be accountable, in the sense that whoever is giving any responsibility, he or she discharge that responsibility to the best of his ability using the constitutional instrument. And if there is any infraction, that person should be held responsible for it. But over time, people will commit whatever they want because they know there won't be any sanction, so they go scot-free with it. And
now let's talk about accountability. You know, talking about accountability, we've seen, you know, purchase of hardware equipment, you know, by government in the past, or rather I would say budgetary allocations, you know, for the purchase of, you know, equipments, you know, and all of that. But suddenly we realize that we do not even really have enough, you know, to deal with, you know, the recent realities that is facing us, you know, in the country. So can we really say that with the budgetary allocations that have been made in the past, with the hardwares that we have at the moment, is it commensurable?
Well, if you are looking at it from the perspective of the current realities of the Nigerian society, you know, so many security challenges that require weaponry and equipment and more boots on the ground. We don't have enough, and we need more. Even though there is nowhere at any given point in time you always get what you want at, you know, but that notwithstanding, we still need equipment, we still need these weapons. At the same time, we need to understand that these problems, it is not just that of the armed forces or the security forces. It's a collective responsibility. And how do I mean? Now, we go back to what I said earlier on, irrespective of, you know, the menace of informants. Take, for instance, the same group of people, in fact, there are some people that are benefiting from the complex situations. There are people that provide logistics. Take, for instance, depending on the location of where the Boko Haram terrorists are, because of the continuous onslaught, it is very difficult for them to get some of this logistics. Take, for instance, petroleum, oil, and lubricant. A 5-liter gallon of petrol cost as much as 5,000 naira, depending on the location. And somebody will see it as a means of getting, you know, money. No matter what the risks are, they will definitely ensure that they supply either the bandit or the terrorists, as the case may be. Now, you look at that as issue number one. Issue number two is the issue of intelligence and information gathering, particularly the human intelligence. There are some group of people that benefit. They are the same people that are trading information to the criminals with the security forces also. Unless we deal with these issues, so long as so long as they continue, you continue to have problems, because it is more or less like counterproductive. You are equipping the people, and there are some people that are betraying that equipment, in the sense that, you know, they tell them where, you know, and when the security forces will be, and all they have to do is to lay ambush for them. And beyond that, again, there are people that up to now, they don't see security challenges as a collective responsibility that need to be dealt with as such. You know, so long as you are not in government, or so long as it does not affect your village or local government, well, so be it. But no, even the average, in fact, a word of encouragement matters. Talk less of maybe going out of your way to sabotage some of the activities of the Nigerian troops. So these are the issues that we need to address.
All right. You know, some experts have suggested, you know, utilizing community policing and help tackle the security challenges we're facing. But in recent time, we saw the Reps Committee on Constitution Amendment kick against, you know, community policing. Are you for or against community policing? Well,
it depends on what you mean by community policing. If it is community policing as I know it, the way it was launched in 2014 or thereabout, I think about how many years ago, I am for community policing. More so, and I will tell you why. Because I had the privilege of going to the National Institute of Policy and Strategic Studies, Kuru, and in 2018, the theme of our course, Sec 40, you know, was to interrogate the internal security framework of Nigeria, community policing, policy, options, and strategy. And we did a diligent job, in the sense that there is no part and, you know, nook and cranny of Nigerian society that we have not been to, and there is no security agencies that we have not interrogated. And we went to 6 African countries and 6 other countries beyond the African continent, in which we compared the internal security architecture and mechanism of those countries vis-a-vis what is happening in Nigeria. And we found out, take for instance Ghana in particular. Ghana has a very fantastic community policing system, as well as Italy. And we brought in suggestions, or we made suggestions, you know, recommendation and implementation strategy. And that is why in November 2018, there was move to ensure that community policing is, you know, given the desired impetus in this country. But unfortunately, typical of the Nigerian society, people tend to misunderstand some of the issues associated. People who are thinking of, you know, state police and all the rest. But the concept of community policing, and you look at the principalness, it is being proactive, it is community-based, and it is intelligence-driven. So if that is it, I think community policing is one of the panaceas to security challenges in this country, because everybody will be involved, and these people will be deployed within the society, and they have a clear structure, they are answerable, and they are integrated into the Nigerian security architecture. So invariably, community policing, whether we like it or not, is one of the key solutions to Nigeria's security challenges.
Now, given in terms of providing information, yes, community policing is very critical. But again, you know, the concern about the community policing thing is that we are talking about, you know, the insufficiency of our troops on the ground. And so of what importance is an information that will not be acted upon? So for instance, you have a community that, you know, gives information way ahead of time, you know, for our security agents to act on it. And then sometimes we've even heard that there will be a report about a possible attack, and then there will be no response from our security forces. Sometimes the attacks happen for hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, and there's little or no response because probably the personnel are far off, you know, the location of where that attack is going on. And, you know, you have these ungoverned spaces everywhere and so on. So how effective will community policing be in this instance?
It is going to be effective, but what I want you to understand, I said it is one of the panaceas of, you know, solving security challenges in the country. So it is not just the only solution. It is supposed to be in combination with other measures. Take, for instance, we tend to neglect the importance of technology, especially in tackling security challenges. You know, there are modern equipment and all the rest, modern communication system, and that will aid, and even beyond that, even the equipment of the troops or the security forces themselves. So it is a combination of so many factors. And invariably, there is also the issue of security education. Then there is also the issue of the numbers. Take, for instance, look at what is the total number of, you know, those involved in the security architecture of this country. I'm talking about the armed forces and other security agencies vis-a-vis the population of this country, and given the security challenges that we have. So invariably, we need to have more numbers, we need to have more equipment, we have to involve you know, use of technology, we have to improve on the security education, and above all, good governance.
Okay. Now, talking about good governance, what role do you think corruption has to play in all of this?
Well, definitely corruption, you know, is one of the bane of the Nigerian society. And when you talk about corruption, sometimes people tend to look at humongous amount of money or no. And I think it has to do with the issue of accountability, regardless of wherever you find yourself. It could be at higher or lower level. So corruptions, to a large extent, affect, you know, national development. How does it affect national development? You have resources meant for a particular purpose, and somebody will squander it or will not give the right amount of money or the qualitative services or quantity as it is. So to a large extent, it affects invariably almost everything, you know, that is associated with Nigerian society. And that is why we are having the problems that we're having. And unless we tackle corruption in every sector of the Nigerian society, wherever it manifests itself, then we'll continue to have a problem. Why? Because the people that are supposed to do the right thing, they will not do it, and they will go scot-free. And that will encourage other people to do. And a lot of people are being deprived of, you know, opportunities, and so on and so forth.
All right. Now, there is this, you know, alarm that the Nigerian police raised some time ago as to missing rifles. You know, hundreds of thousands of rifles were missing. And, you know, there's just no one to give an account as to where they are. So I'm concerned. We've seen recent purchase of equipment for our military. And we've also heard stories about how, you know, terrorists will invade the military base, you know, take, you know, armories belonging to our troops and all of that. How can we ensure that some of the procurements that we are making do not end up in the hands of the very people that we are fighting?
Well, the solution is simple, is to ensure accountability. And this is not just the police, actually. We tend to neglect the issue of monitoring and evaluation. Whoever is saddled with responsibility should be made to be accountable, and there should be periodic checks. And I know for the military there is this what they call admin and annual admin inspection. You inspect the weaponry, the equipment, in fact even living quarters. To what extent have they been doing so in the police? I don't know. And but beyond that, again, those who are responsible for, the storage of these weapons, we have to critically examine them and make sure they are rotated. They make sure that there is always, periodic checks. Take, for instance, today, how many rifles or pistols were issued, how many rounds of ammunition. Take, for instance, a particular division or a particular zone, and so on. Within the next coming 24 hours, how many have been expended? What are the reasons? And if there is any infraction, what functions are you making? And beyond that, again, we have to be diligent, especially during training sessions, because most of them, that is where they get missing. Because you are supposed to have a particular, practice. Take, for instance, if you are going for range classification, you are supposed to go for maybe standing, kneeling position or whatever, lying position. Maybe they say a practice of 10 rounds of ammunition. Have time to ensure that actually you have been given 10 rounds of ammunition. And make sure that you exhausted 10 rounds of ammunition. If there is any missing magazine, you have to account for it. And I know in the military that I was, if you go out for such training exercise, but at the end of the day, nobody leaves the shooting range unless you are searched right from the commander. Commander at any level. Even if it is the chief of army staff, he has to hands up. Somebody has to frisk him, and he will swear that he doesn't have a live or empty case in his possession. And they will warn you that by the time we leave this place, if any is found on you, then you will be found culpable. To what extent have we been practicing this in real practical terms? I really don't know. And I think we have to go back to those bases, not just necessarily for the military, but also of the police. But of course, now we have problem of security challenges that it is very difficult to continue with all these bureaucracies and all the rest. But nevertheless, these are control items. Arms and ammunition, they are no granite. We know the damage they could cause. Therefore, we have to be diligent in issuance and making sure that we retrieve them when it's supposed to be retrieved. These are the issues. Then again, there is the issue of proliferation of these small and light weapons within the society. How do they come into the society? And by the way, again, there is a flourishing industry of local manufacturers of arms and ammunition. That with what do you call it, shock absorber of your motorcycle now forms a cylinder of an average weapon in Nigerian society. But thank God for the center that is created, and I believe we need to support them to ensure that we mop up this thing. So honestly, some of all these problems, they don't have one-off thing. You have to, have a combination of other factors to ensure that, we succeed.
Okay. One other issue I would like to raise is that there are some experts that have said, why don't we think about maybe recalling some retirees back into the service, like you? Should we, be thinking in that line, given the fact that we need hands now, in the force?
Do you actually need to recall them? I think, in as far as much I'm concerned for the armed forces of Nigeria, and I know to a large extent, thank God for the social media, I think they have been contributing to the best of their ability. Possibly it is not enough, and we need to harness, and I have seen where the service chiefs and the chief of defense staff, they have gone to various geopolitical regions of the country, you know, consulting with retired colleagues and charting the way forward. And I can tell you, for the armed forces that I know, there is still communication, you know, between those that have retired and those in the service. They have been given the best of advice, as the case may be. So you might not necessarily, you know, recall them in the way you want them to be recalled, to be drafted, putting them in one place and all the rest. No, they have been given their advices one way or the other, despite the fact that some of them have become entrepreneurs, you know, doing very well in their respective areas of endeavors. But again, there is also provisioning for, you know, reserve. I don't think we have reached that point, and I think we need to.
You don't think we haven't got to that?
I don't think so. We have abundant manpower within the Nigerian society that we can recruit more, we can commission more, so that people with more energy can give, you know, their own.
Yes, but the problem
quota.
with that, you know, the issue of experience, the issue of whether you can even guarantee that some of them are actually, you know, joining the force, you know, to actually to protect the country.
Yeah, well, you see the problem with that, like, well, we have to interrogate the training system within the Nigerian society, because, I mean, the various security agencies, for instance, the value system of the Nigerian society has changed over time, and the training period has not changed. So we need to interrogate, you know, the recruitment system, but it is not even the recruitment system. You see, the people that are joining the security sector now are not necessarily the people that are really interested, you know, in contributing in that aspect. It's because they don't have other options or alternatives. And that is why you even have problem in managing some of them when they are in service. Take, for instance, you get calls here and there simply because somebody has been deployed to Operation Hadinkai or Wild Stroke or Hadirin Jaji and all the rest of them. You know, he's the only child in the what he has never for once thought of, you know, the difficulties associated with wearing the uniform. He or she is only thinking of the privileges. Now they said, okay, go to Malam Patori and you start saying one light a light. So these are the issues. So we have to interrogate the value system. And I can tell you, we have all it takes to deal with security problems of this country.
All right, thank you so
all
much.
we need to do is to holistic approach to it.
Thank
Okay.
you so
Well,
much.
thank you for coming on Daybreak this morning and sharing your perspectives with us. We
We
really
hope to
appreciate it.
calling you next time.
Thank you so much, and I wish you a happy new year and congratulations for the new studio. Anyway,
Thank you so much. We've been speaking with Brigadier General Kukasheka Usman, and retired. He is the former spokesman of the Nigerian Army, talking to us about recent realities as far as our security in the country is concerned. We'll take a short breather, and then when we come back, the show continues. Please stay with us. From all around the world,
Our news is factual and concise.
giving you fresh news as it breaks.
Nigerians in the diaspora have decried the unavailability of Nigerian passport booklet.
One tricycle rider feared death while 6 others are critically injured after a moving train hit.
When I sit on the news desk every day,
There's a deep sense of responsibility that overwhelms me.
a responsibility to deliver a message to our viewers.
In the most professional way possible. Trust TV, documenting the Nigerian story.
coronavirus disease, COVID-19, is an infectious disease caused by SARS-CoV-2 virus. Most people who fall sick with COVID-19 will experience mild to moderate symptoms and recover without special treatment. However, some will become seriously ill and require medical attention. The virus can spread from an infected person's mouth or nose in small liquid particles when they cough, sneeze, speak, sing, or breathe. These particles range from larger respiratory droplets to smaller aerosols. You can be infected by breathing in the virus if you're near someone who has COVID-19 or by touching a contaminated surface and then touching your eyes, nose, or mouth. The virus spreads more easily indoors and in crowded settings. Maintain a safe distance from others at least 2 meters even if they don't appear to be sick. Wear a mask in public, especially indoors or when physical distancing is not possible. Clean your hands often. Use soap and water or an alcohol-based hand sanitizer. Cover your nose and mouth with your bent elbow or a tissue when you cough or sneeze. Stay home if you feel unwell. Get vaccinated. Properly fitted masks can help prevent the spread of the virus from the person wearing the mask to others. Masks alone do not protect against COVID-19 and should be combined with physical distancing and hand hygiene. Protect yourself and others around you by knowing the facts and taking appropriate precautions. Follow advice provided by your local health authority. This message is brought to you by Trust TV.
All right, welcome back. You're still watching Daybreak on Trust Television. It's now time for the second discussion on the program this morning. Now, credit rating agency Augusto & Co. has said Nigeria's foreign debt could rise from about 15 trillion to 18 trillion naira if the Central Bank of Nigeria devalues the naira at 20%. The firm, in its economic newsletter for January 2022 edition, said Nigeria has assumed a tighter foreign exchange policy stance since 2015, and this has been elevated since 2020 to date, as was the case in the recent First Monetary Policy Committee for 2022. Now, according to the report, a tighter forex stance has been characterized by political interference and demand management amidst a weaker supply of the US dollar in the foreign exchange market. Now, to give us perspectives on this, we have an economist and lecturer from Bayes University here in Abuja, Professor Mukhtar Imam. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Well, welcome on the show. When you talk about, Nigeria's currency today, a lot of people express concern as to the rate at which the naira is losing its value day by day. We've seen days that the naira was just 100 plus, also gradually to about 200, and then later, and now we are talking about 500 naira. Only God knows in the next few months what's going to happen. Is the central bank helpless, in terms of controlling the value of our naira?
The central bank has a significant role to play in terms of designing monetary policies that would strengthen the position of the local currency. But not all of the responsibility of ensuring that the currency is strengthened lies with the CBN. But like you said, I think there have been a lot of policy somersaults within the Apex Bank that have not been very helpful in terms of strengthening the value of the naira. For example, we're talking about the foreign exchange. The problem with the forex basically started when the CBN in its wisdom or lack of it, decided to shift stance as far as foreign exchange regimes are concerned. Now, in Nigeria, over the years, there are basically two types of foreign exchange regimes. You either have the pegged, or which is basically the rigid, or you have the flexible, which is the floating. The central bank decided to move from the rigid to semi-rigid. Now, the problem with assuming a neutral position in that is that you overnight create artificial billionaires, because you have people within the forex market who are waiting for that opportunity, right, to explore the system, to manipulate the system. And that was exactly what we saw happen when the CBN decided to move its stance from the rigid to the semi-rigid. It wasn't the floating. We did not move from the rigid to the floating. Now, the problem with that is the moment you do that, you create a shock in the market. It is like humans. Today, we have been told that there's COVID, right? And as a result of the fear factor, which is a natural response you have to any situation you have no understanding about, you begin to, there's that, you know, that's the human nature of self-preservation, of survival begins to kick in, and then you put on a mask. This is exactly what happens to the market. Volatility hits and the market responds. Now, that policy wasn't very helpful. And quite frankly, the reason is very simple. You had people in the commercial banks who were connivers with directors in the CBN. And my position was clear, or a lot of individuals' position and scholars and analysts was clear, that the broom needed to visit the CBN at the time. Because what you had happening, including the emir, the former emir of Kano, Sanusi Lamido, he talked about this a number of times. Now you're moving the forex regime overnight without putting in place measures that will ensure that there's a flow, there's the availability of forex. And then you have allowed people who have the forex in their hands to hoard, thereby starving the market. Thereby starving people who, for example, are manufacturers and require the forex to bring in certain products or certain manufacturing equipment to be able to serve the economy. And so we had a lot of billionaires being created overnight at that time. And this is exactly what is still going on till today. A classical example, or rather another instance in line with the conversation, would be when we had the currency swap. And we were talking about including the renminbi, the Chinese currency, right, the yuan, into foreign exchange trade and so on and so forth. At the time, what happened? We still had people who were saboteurs in the system who would go around, buy the yuan, claiming they're going to China for trade, remain in this country, turn around, turn it into dollar, and then sell to the market.
Okay.
And so when you go to the commercial banks, they tell you, go to the black market, please. Because you have, the reality is this, the bank execs of the commercial banks are conniving with directors in the CBN, and a lot of them own the foreign exchange.
Okay.
And so this is the situation.
So now, if the CBN eventually devalues the Naira at 20%, wouldn't we be heading for economic bewilderness in some sort?
Well, for me, I am not a fan of devaluation. I've never been a fan of devaluation. We have devalued, what, 11, 12 times in this country? What result has that given to us? When Lagarde, remember when Lagarde was still the country rep of IMF and visited the country, she told the president a number of things that she assumed were challenges to the Nigerian system. And part of the things she talked about was devaluation. Devaluation has not really helped, and it will not help. And part of the reason, or the simple reason why devaluation is not going to help at this point in time, is because we're still at that point where, regardless of what the CBN and the central government is doing, we're still import dependent. This is just the reality. Our economy is still dollarized. We still haven't moved from that, because a lot of the things that we have around here, take the Abuja breakfast, for example, 60% to 80% of it is imported. And that's why my conclusion or submission about this is that our blood is also imported. So basically, it goes to tell you, you see, the consumption rate of imported goods are high. We are still not being able to match. We have just talked about this. The Bloomberg and the IMF released a report a few weeks ago and said that, that revealed that food inflation has risen to what? 16% in this country. This is a country that has 60% of the world's arable land. I did not say Nigeria's land is 60% arable. 60% of the world's arable land, implying that we can feed the world. Yet, we are faced with food scarcity. There's a shortage of food in this country. And yet you expect that, devaluing your currency is going to do any good. No, it's not going to do any good. You devalue your currency where you have significant goods for export, where you can match the international market. You can flood the international market with goods. Then you devalue your currency. This is what the Chinese are doing, and this is what has created the currency war between the United States and the Chinese. Because what happens is when you have a lot of goods and people patronize from outside, you devalue your currency, it sort of saturates the market and allows you to have some balance, because you would have a lot of influx, people coming in to purchase. What are we exporting? Crude oil and corruption. Nobody's going to buy corruption. Crude oil, the world is already saturated with crude. Look what happened in the days of COVID, when when COVID was at its peak, right? There was a downward curve in the demand and supply curve for oil, because the market was saturated.
But in the past few days, we've seen an increase in the price of, crude, globally.
Yes, no doubt about that.
Yeah, so are we making the most of it, in your opinion?
Well, I think we... at this point, it will only be fair to say that we have made some significant strides. Look at when you look at our our external reserve, for example, it has placed Nigeria as the largest economy on the African continent, which is a good indicator. Take, for example, when we're talking about the ECO, right? Trying to create a single currency for the West African sub-region. Part of the condition was that you must have an external reserve that can be a shock absorber. In the event investors come in and things fail, they know they have something to fall back on. So that is a very good indicator. It tells foreign investors that we are a serious economy. So basically, we have been able to save, no doubt about that. We have been able also to invest some of that proceeds into infrastructural development. There's no doubt about that. There are a good number of infrastructural projects going on here and there, even though I still feel that infrastructural projects or capital projects must be looked at from the realm of short, medium, and long term. Most of the investments we have in infrastructure today are basically long term, and these are things that have a long premium yield period. And Nigerians are not concerned about the macro; they want the micro, food, immediate results,
like sharp.
So with all of these challenges that we are facing, do you think there's something wrong with our monetary policy?
Yeah, I think there are challenges with our monetary policies, but beyond the monetary policies, I think, the thing is this, that you have to have a monetary and fiscal policy that complements one another. Without all of that, no matter how brilliant your monetary policies look or assume to look, you would have challenges in either the medium or long term. And these are some of the challenges we're being faced with. Currently, we're talking about these monetary policies that are either mismatching or flip-flopping, yet we have the the challenges of insecurity, right? We're talking about an inflation in food prices, and the reason is very simple. 40,000 hectares of land in northern Nigeria have been abandoned, and this has been conservative with the figure. Imagine you abandoning 40,000 hectares of land that will provide food for people. And what's the reason? Simple: insecurity. People can no longer go to their farms, they're running away, and so on and so forth. So until we're able to address some of these fiscal issues, our monetary policies, no matter how good they look, might not necessarily augur well. And this is the reason why we're stuck where we are. Again, these are part of the things that have affected debt. For example, you find that our debt profile is it's ballooning, right? It's all a part of what we're talking about here, a mismatch in the monetary policies. But then again, of course, the fiscal issues. You must look at unemployment, you must look at infrastructural development, and so on and so forth. I think in the short run, these things could fix the situation.
Now, do you think that there is some kind of political interference when it comes to the way we are managing our forex? In Nigeria, the elites, for instance, some of them do not even trade in. They don't have anything to do with the naira. It's about hard currencies, either pounds or dollars, and all of that. So, when you look at that, do you consider that as a problem to us?
It is. It's a huge challenge. It's one of the most significant challenges that we're being faced with. You see, that's why I talked about the dollarized Nigerian economy. Yes, there's no doubt. Virtually all economies around the world are dollarized, because when you look at the external reserves of the sovereign wealth fund of virtually all the countries, including the largest economy in the world, China, right? That sounds unconventional, cool? China, when you ask what is the external reserve of China, you still hear $500 billion. So at the end of the day, virtually all economies, and this is because there is an international financial oligarchy. And the US dollar, of course, because it's the only resource the US has, it must protect what it has. And so to trade in the international market, it has to be in the dollar. So yes, there is that aspect, that, you know, dynamic around the dollar. But the reality is this, that when your domestic economy becomes so dollar dependent, take out the dollar and the naira today and go to your child's school to pay school fees. And be rest assured the principal or the cashier is going to reach for the dollar first. This is the irony of where we are. We find that, you see, so that flair, the love, the push for the dollar has basically crippled our currency. And there is also the problem, there's a social problem to this. You see, economists like to always look at figure. But we must understand that there are sociological issues to whatever conversation we're having around the economy as well. And it is about mindset, it's about the thought process of individuals within that society. If we do not fix our thought process and our mindset, and the social psychological conditioning of the average Nigerian person continues along the dimension where it is, i.e. lack of patriotism, i.e. indiscipline, which is a part of what Lagarde talked about when she met the president. She said, Mr. President, your people are a bunch of indisciplined lot. Nigerians reach for a jugular vein without looking at the message, but the reality is what it is. So basically, when you look at all of that, vis-a-vis our drive, push for the dollar, it becomes a problem. Our elites, like you rightly mentioned, would rather stash the dollar somewhere because they feel it's a foreign and hard currency and it has more value than the naira, thereby devaluing our own currency. Because believe in me, if we were to ransack the houses of elites and push out all the dollar saved somewhere, well, this is an assumption, but because we're within the realm of assumption,
yeah, but we've heard stories. I mean, we live among people.
Exactly. So when we push out all this dollar, say for example, there's a convention going on. I didn't say so. And we're able to push out all the dollar into circulation. Trust me, the value of the dollar will crash within the shortest period of time. But we have people who sit on them and then starve manufacturers, starve people who are processing, starve people who are producing.
Who actually need them,
exactly.
For the common good.
Exactly. And so this becomes a huge challenge, and it is not very helpful. And then on the flip side, you have people who are also living on imported goods. They feed on pizza. You remember the former Minister of Agriculture said this, that people import pizza. British Airways bring pizza to the country.
Okay.
So when you look around this, you would find that these are some of the challenges that we're being faced with, you know, at that micro level. But then there are also macro level issues that must be fixed, and that's the responsibility of government at all levels. Often at times the misconception is focusing attention on the central government alone. The state governments are as much to blame, if not much more to blame, as the central government is. Because, of course, these are the people who are assumed to be nearer to the people. And these are the people who sit on their thrones like demigods and emperors and refuse to do anything. Imagine a governor giving people who want cutlasses in 2020 and 21 to go to the farm. How do you expect that that venture is going to be lucrative enough for anybody who intends to go into farming?
Or wheelbarrows. I recall that too.
Oh my.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
We have to end the discussion here. We appreciate your coming.
Thank you for having me.
We really, I mean,
Quite
it's very
interesting.
Yes. For those who are just joining, I think you've missed, but you can always catch up, you know, on our YouTube and also on our social media platform. We've been speaking with an economist and also a lecturer from Bayes University, and he's a Professor Mukhtar Imam here. Thank you again.
I hope to call you next time.
I will be here. Brilliant.
All right. With that, we've come to the end of the show for today. It's been quite interesting. Insecurity and economy. I mean, these are two things that cannot be separated, is it?
Cannot be overemphasized. Very, very important.
All right. So join us again tomorrow for another time on the program. My name is Ayuba Ilya. Bye for now.
And I'm Zainab Bala. See you tomorrow.